So, hi, my name's Bill Buchanan, and I lead a podcast in the World Leaders in Cryptography series. So, I'm so happy to have Chris Peikert here. Hi, Chris.
Hello, good to be with you.
So, Chris is a professor in the Computer Science and Engineering Department at the University of Michigan. He completed his PhD in 2006 within the MIT Computer Science and AI Laboratory under the mentorship of Silvio Micali. He received a Test of Time award at Crypto 2008 for a paper entitled A Framework for Efficient and Composable Oblivious Transfer, and also a TCC Test of Time award for his paper on efficient collision-resistant hashing from worst-case assumptions on cyclic lattices in 2006. In 2024, Chris was elected as a Fellow of the International Association of Cryptologic Research and is seen as one of the world leaders in lattice-based methods. So, what's your current role and what does a typical day involve for you?
Great. Yeah, I'm a professor here at Michigan in the Computer Science and Engineering department. And my typical day is like a lot of professors, a lot of different things. There's teaching, which I just finished for this semester. I was actually double teaching, so it was a very heavy teaching semester. And also doing research with my PhD students mainly, and then service to the department and to the cryptologic community. So being on program committees, reviewing papers, service to the department. I'm the recently was chosen as the chair of the graduate program in computer science here. So that's been a new role, different things. I've been on, hiring committees and admissions committees and things of that nature over the years as well.
That's good. And it's obviously a balance between teaching, admin, and research. And what percentage of your time roughly is involved in doing research?
Yeah, people like to say, the ideal percentages are 50% teaching, 50% research, and 50% service. I don't think I manage those quite right, but it varies a lot. So in the past semester, it's been disproportionately on the teaching side, and then in the coming semester, I won't have any teaching, and there's a number of research projects that I'm trying to get out through the pipeline. They're mature, but we need to wrap everything up and finish off different parts. So, and then in the summers, it's a lot more free. There's no service. You get more time to kind of think deeply, start new projects, make big progress on things that you started but didn't get a lot of traction on, things of that nature. So it's a nice role and a nice job to have because things are always changing, right? You kind of change focus from time to time, and keeps things fresh.
Yeah. I suppose like in Michigan, it changes as the seasons. So just now, what's the weather there?
That too. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have some lovely, pretty snow coming down right now. Just some flurries, but it's December, so it will stick to the ground for a little while, and then we'll get some warmer days, and it will melt, and we'll get some mud or some some wet stuff. But yeah, so you get to change. Winters, summers are glorious, and
Yeah.
falls are also beautiful.
Yeah. That's good. As if we go right back to your days at school, what were you like as a student at school?
More the younger days.
Early days, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think from a very early age, I was really interested in math. I was just very curious about math and had an aptitude for it. And I like to do math puzzles and kind of enrichment type math, right? Not just the usual. Okay, we're going to do arithmetic and multiplying and dividing and things like that. So more logical puzzles and different things related to numbers and things we now would call number theory or combinatorics or things like that. I like to do the math competitions they have for primary school and middle school and so forth. And I also, I don't remember this, but I'm told that as a young kid, maybe in third grade or second grade, we went to a science museum, and I think there was an Apple computer there, and
Mm.
my
Me
parents
too.
could not pull me off of it. They could not get me out of there. So I was very interested in computers at the time, and we did get a personal computer, I think in third grade for Christmas, and I was just on that thing all the time. I wanted to see what I could make it do, and programming BASIC and Pascal and all these kind of early learning languages and things like that. So from a very early age, I was really into computers and math and the intersection between the two of them.
Yeah. And can you remember what that computer was? You talked about an Apple. I assume it was an Apple II that you first saw.
Yeah, no, it was not. So it was a IBM PC clone, right? One of
Yeah.
the It was a 8088 chip
Yeah.
with a 30
Oh,
megabyte
yeah.
hard drive.
Oh,
You know,
16-bit processor. Yeah. Yeah.
yes, exactly. I think it was four megahertz or something like that. I mean,
4.7.
just
That's right.
yeah, that probably with a little
Yeah.
turbo switch where you could
Turbo
make it go a
switch, it
little bit
didn't work.
faster.
Yeah. And a 640K of memory, something like that.
We did have 640K. Yep, that's right. That's right.
And it
And a
weighed
five
it
and a
weighed a
quarter inch
ton.
floppy disk.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it weighed a ton. Yeah, that was the XT, I think it was the XT. That was the
Yeah, it
stripped
was
down
modeled on the
PC.
XT.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So
So that
what
was a
got you in?
formative experience.
Yeah. So what got you into cryptography?
So this I do remember actually. So I did, like math and so forth. And I think it was a middle school. I did some math competition, and you take the test in the morning, and then while they're grading it, they had a speaker, a guest speaker, give a lecture about some topic. And I don't remember who it was. I wish I did, but he gave a talk explaining the math of RSA crypto system
Oh,
to the audience. And very I very strongly remember the feeling of like, this is amazing.
yeah.
This is wild. I can't believe this is possible. All this sort of just useless theoretical math is now giving us cryptography, which I thought was incredible. And I think that was a very pivotal moment where I said, I need to know more about this. Like, this is very exciting. So I kind of tried to find what I could, reading different things and popular accounts of the development of cryptography and public key, technology and so forth. And so I always was very excited by that. I wasn't doing research in it or anything like that, but just kind of learning and picking up what I could over the years. And then in college, I was able to take some computer science and computer security classes and a cryptography class from Silvio, actually, who would become
Oh,
my PhD advisor. And so I always loved it, and the more I got into it, the more I liked it, and the rest is history.
that's great. And you did your college work was at MIT.
Yes, I went to undergrad at MIT, and then I stayed on for the PhD there.
You liked it so much that you stayed.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean that was obviously the home of RSA and some amazing researchers. So what was it like working in the computer science and AI lab at that time for your PhD? What other cryptography researchers were around at that time?
Yeah, I mean it was 10 years that I was there, so it was quite a while
Wow.
combining
Yeah.
undergrad and I did a fifth year master's and then PhD. So yeah, I mean it was amazing. I got to take a computer security class from Ron Rivest, and
Wow.
that was about not just cryptography, lots of different security topics. Of course, I like the cryptography the most. Um, and one of his uh, PhD student, Anna Lasanskia, who's now at Brown. She was the TA for my cryptography course that I took from Silvio. And during my fifth year master's, I did a research project with her, kind of supervised and guided by her which was great. That led to a paper for us. So she really helped me out to kind of understand what cryptographic research is like, and how to write a paper and make a discovery and all those good things. So that was the first research experience I had with her. There were lots of people around. At the time, I didn't necessarily intersect with them when I was an undergrad. So, Evgeny Dodis is a major figure in computer science. He's there. Tal Malkin was there at the time. So I would kind of bump into them, but I didn't really know them very well. And then in my graduate program, I was an office mate with Avi Shalat, who's now at Northeastern, and we had a lot of fun together. We would do different sports and things. Adam Smith was another who was around. We had an office with him. Steve Weiss, I remember, who's now out in the Bay Area. He's done some commercialization work in computer security. Lots and lots of people. I mean, it was a very vital area. And not just in cryptography. The theory lab as a whole was really very kind of friendly and collaborative. And so we would constantly be, doing social things or talking about research problems with people who did algorithms or who did machine learning or different topics like that.
Yeah. About how many PhD students were around at that time?
Oh gosh, I mean, I want to say around 20 or so in the immediate milieu, I guess, depending on how you count. But, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And do you currently teach? Well, you obviously said that you do teach. What subjects do you actually teach at the current time?
I teach almost all different theory classes. This past semester, I was teaching the undergraduate theory course, which is one of the required courses here for the undergraduate degree. And that's kind of a fast introduction to algorithms, to computability theory, NP hardness, and complexity theory, cryptography. It's kind of a great ideas taught fast type of course. And then I've taught undergraduate cryptography here before. I teach a graduate cryptography course pretty frequently. And then there are other courses like a special lattices in cryptography course that I teach every couple of years. A seminar, kind of mixture of seminar and lecture type. And then there are other courses that come up, and randomness in computer science and topics like that. So we have a pretty large and growing theory group over the past few years. So there's a lot of theory courses that are available, and so we can kind of mix things up from time to time with what we teach.
Is there any topics that you think students generally struggle with?
I guess it's tough to generalize. Definitely proof-based work is very different from what a lot of students have done in the past and are experienced with. If they're thinking computer science is more programming based or things like that. So it's definitely an eye opener and a little bit of a can be a discomfort zone to say, okay, we're going to prove things about correctness of algorithms, or we're going to prove a reduction is correct, or things of that nature.
Yeah. And you're quite an inspiration as a researcher because you became a world leader in a field and you have continued to be a world leader. Many researchers will start a field off and then everyone will catch up with them and overtake them. But you're very unusual. You've continued to focus on a single hard topic that nobody could see coming. I mean, it's a bit like elliptic curve cryptography, and nobody quite understood it when Niall Kobolitz published in it, and it was only Satoshi Nakamoto who really adopted it. So what is it about lattice cryptography that you find so interesting?
Wow, that's a big question, because it's got a big answer. There's so many things. Um, I go back to the first paper that I worked on, the first research project that I worked on with Alain Rosen, which resulted in that TCC paper in 2006. Um, it was such a combination of things that were really attractive to me. There were so many different kinds of math coming together in one in this topic. So there was abstract algebra in the use of these rings, and um, there was fast algorithms like fast Fourier transform type algorithms and things like that, which I always had a soft spot for. There was math I had never really worked on before, like harmonic analysis or Fourier analysis, which I had heard of, and I knew kind of the basic premises, but seeing it done with lattices was completely new, and I thought that was really beautiful. And then this idea of a worst case hardness assumption giving average case cryptographic hard problems was kind of mind blowing to me. I think I had first encountered the idea in a talk that Shafi Goldwasser gave. I think it was at TCC 2005, which was at MIT. So I just had to go kind of downstairs and go to this talk. And it's funny, Shafi and a student had a paper in this conference, and I'm not even sure what the topic of the paper was. It's something to do with iTideWork crypto system. But basically, Shafi just kind of gave a talk about how amazing this worst case, average case connection is in lattices. And I'm not sure even she talked about the paper, or maybe at the end she mentioned something about what they did in the paper. But it was really just a very inspiring talk. And I said, oh, I'd love to know more about this. And then a few months later, this opportunity came up, and we started digging into these papers. And I thought, this is beautiful math. It's brilliant. It's fast. It's efficient. This is something. It was really the first time where I felt this is a topic I feel go deep into and make a theme of what I want to do, rather than previously I had kind of worked on various different things here and there, but didn't have a big theme to it that I had found yet.
That's excellent. And could you just explain simply how lattice cryptography actually works, if that's possible?
Or yeah, I can try. I think the most basic idea is a lattice is this geometric structure. It's this regular grid of points, right, that are arranged in a periodic, regular way in high dimensions. And to do cryptography, you need some hard problem. You need a problem to be hard for the attacker to solve, but easy for someone who knows the secret key, to be able to decrypt a ciphertext, for example, or to be able to sign a message. And so the basic idea is that the public key is some description of a lattice, and the secret key is some short vector, some vector that's close to the origin, so a point in the lattice that's relatively short. And having knowledge of short vectors in a lattice allows you to do some things like generate other short points in the lattice, or decode points under error that are close to the lattice but not quite in it. So this sort of idea of knowing a secret short vectors in a lattice, giving you powers that somebody who doesn't know them doesn't have, is the main idea. And so this is kind of the first asymmetry between what the public knows, what the adversary knows, and what the owner of the system knows, and what they can do. And so that's the start. And then from this basic idea, we can do so many amazing cryptographic constructions and concepts that can be realized from this basic idea. It's really remarkable.
Yeah. And so what's the basic hard problem that lattice methods introduce?
Yeah, so the basic hard problem is something like, if I give you a lattice find a vector in the lattice that's close to the origin, right? That's relatively short. Or a very closely related one is I give you a lattice and I give you some point in space, which is not in the lattice, but find a lattice point that's relatively close to this target point that I give you. So these are known as the shortest vector problem or the closest vector problem, or the approximate shortest or closest vector problems. And these are the basic kind of DNA or foundation of what hard problems we use for getting security in lattice crypto systems.
Yeah, so we have A, which is a matrix. We have S, which is your secret key, and then we have the error. So AS plus E gives you your problem. So how does the trapdoor work in lattice methods?
Right. Yeah. So a trapdoor is kind of an umbrella term for some secret knowledge or secret vectors, which allow you to do something that the attacker can't do. But in a more precise sense, it's a way of doing really two things. So one thing you can do with a trapdoor is, given this AS plus E that you just mentioned, you can actually solve for the secret S and the error E. Whereas someone who doesn't know the trapdoor, this AS plus E looks like it's completely random. It's hard to find S and E from it. So it's kind of a way of inverting a hard function, right? Or solving the hard problem because you've embedded a trapdoor into the problem itself. That's one thing you can do with the trapdoor. The other thing you can do with the trapdoor is to generate many random short vectors in the lattice. And you can even, if you use the right kinds of algorithms, you can even generate short vectors from the lattice, which come from a very nice distribution, like a Gaussian type distribution. So you can randomly sample short lattice vectors from a nice distribution. And that distribution leaks nothing about the shape of your trapdoor or what vectors are in your trapdoor or things of that nature. So it's kind of like, we call it like an oblivious sampler or a zero knowledge sampler, because it doesn't leak any information about the specific trapdoor you're using to sample these vectors. And so with this basic idea, you can do all kinds of amazing things. You can build secure digital signature schemes. You can build identity-based encryption schemes, attribute-based encryption, so many other things that we couldn't possibly have even imagined when first having this idea.
Yeah, and you published a paper entitled "A Decade in Lattice Cryptography." What were your main findings then, and what advancements have happened since then?
Yeah, so I wrote this survey monograph from around 2014 and published in 2016, and my goal there was to try to kind of unify and synthesize or systematize a lot of the progress that had happened starting around 2004 or so in lattices and lattice cryptography. And there had been an explosion of work in that decade, and it really made the field kind of a modern cryptographic subject with very systematic base assumptions that are used for a variety of different constructions, rigorous proofs, security reductions, and things of that nature. And I said at the time, I just thought this work is happening so rapidly, and I think people will need a resource where they can kind of find out, okay, what are the key ideas here? How do the constructions work? What are the main ideas behind the security reductions and proofs, and kind of a starting off point for graduate students or for anyone who wants to understand what's been happening in the field. So I didn't have any original discoveries in that. It was more a survey and systemization type effort. But one thing that I think it did allow was to sort of give some unified notation, a unified perspective on like, here are all the similarities between all these different schemes. They kind of all work at a baseline level in this common way. And then we have all these different, techniques and tricks that allow us to do different things using these basic underlying ideas. And people tell me it's been very useful for them to kind of get an entry into the area, which is exactly what I was hoping for, because it was daunting at the time, to kind of, there's a lot of very different math that cryptographers are not accustomed to, and works in completely different ways. And some of the ways of thinking are similar, and some of the ways of thinking are very different from the classical, factoring or discrete log type cryptography. So that was the goal there. I guess now we're coming up on almost a decade since I started writing it, or maybe more than a decade. I don't think I'll be writing a second decade of lattice cryptography, because
Too much.
Too much has happened. Yeah, I can't even come close to trying to understand everything that's been happening.
No, I think that's right. And obviously, the two main areas that's been applied just now is in post-quantum cryptography and in
Mhm.
homomorphic encryption. Probably they have different challenges. So many people define 4 generations of homomorphic
Mhm.
encryption. What do you think are the main advancements that have happened in the method? Where would you see the
Mhm.
breakpoints? Is it 4 generations, or are there other ones?
Yeah, I see three, maybe four, depending on how you count it, three and a half, perhaps.
Yeah.
So I would say the first generation was definitely Craig Gentry's initial discovery, right, which was a
Mm.
total breakthrough and kind of came out of the blue. Um, Brilliant work and a tour de force, because there's just so much involved in seeing it through from beginning to end. Um, and some features of the first generation were, it was kind of based on some new ad hoc assumptions, like that what you needed to make it all work. Okay, we'll like kind of make an assumption that supports that. But probably more significantly, the error growth, right, under homomorphic operations was um, kind of exponential in the degree of the computation. So the error grew very, very fast, basically. And um, Craig had to do a lot of work to, uh, you know, not make the error blow up too much, and still have some security and so forth. So that was first generation. The second generation I see kind of being with the Brikersky Vaikuntanathan work, starting I think in crypto 2010, I think it was, or maybe 2011, and then BGV as well, where one big innovation there, probably the main one, was to base homomorphic encryption on these more standard assumptions, like learning with errors, right? That has kind of become the, the sort of gold standard assumption for all of lattice cryptography. Um, and they also in that work, or those two works, showed how to make the error grow much uh, less quickly. Still grows fairly quickly, but a qualitative change in how fast the error grows under homomorphic operations. And so that led to like many simplifications, a much better theoretical efficiency, lots of improvements related to that, and just simpler, right? Easier to understand, easier for people to make variations of, and so forth. So that was a great leap forward in the second generation. The third generation, people usually consider to be the Gentry Sahai Waters paper in 2013, which has many commonalities. It's based on learning with errors again. Um, it has a very different type of main decryption and encryption equation, and the way that homomorphic multiplications work is quite different from the prior ones. So qualitatively, it was a really interesting, different way of doing things. And then people have discovered that you can use this scheme to make the error growth very, very slow, right? You can get very, very limited error growth. You can do bootstrapping in different ways that's really quite advantageous. And so there are also many interesting other features that have been built upon to do things like attribute-based encryption and non-interactive zero-knowledge proofs and all kinds of other really cool applications coming from just the basic structure of how the GSW scheme works. And so I'm not sure those were necessarily anticipated as it just was sort of a different way of doing FHE to begin with, and it had all these great, wonderful side effects of other things you can do with it.
Yep, and obviously the CKKS has been quite an advancement where we can actually use floating point values now to that.
Exactly, yeah. And the CKKS one is a very interesting case because structurally it works a lot like the second generation. It's very closely reminiscent of the BGV style. And what's going on the plain text underneath the ciphertext is different in exactly as you said. You can do kind of floating point or real valued arithmetic and approximate computations. And that's sort of all happening in the plain text domain, even though what's happening on the ciphertext domain is virtually identical to how BGV works. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, and it's also interesting now that you're seeing it applied to machine learning. So with neural networks, you have a vector times a matrix multiplication, which is a basic thing that you can do with lattices. And obviously, if you have something like an SVM machine learning model, you can put the encrypted values in with a public key process and then get decrypt. You get the output, which is homomorphic encrypted, and decrypt with the private key. It almost sounds like a perfect solution for cloud-based machine learning, and that's where the crossover of cryptography and machine learning could come in. So obviously, what happens is that through the multiplication of this plus E, AS plus E, if you're multiplying that too many times, then the error or the noise is going to increase. And as you said, you introduce a bootstrapping process. Could you just quickly outline what that bootstrapping process is and how it manages to get rid of that error?
Sure. Yeah. So bootstrapping in FHE was this concept introduced by Craig Gentry and his seminal work on the topic. And the basic idea is, as you said, as you do homomorphic operations, the ciphertext, the noise grows, and if it grows too large, you won't be able to decrypt it. It'll give the wrong answer. And so at some point, the noise grows big enough that, well, I can't do any more homomorphic operations on this ciphertext. It'll make the noise too big and the outcome will be useless. So the brilliant idea that he had was, well, let's homomorphically decrypt this ciphertext, which is a very mind-bending kind of idea. But basically says like, let's look at the decryption as a function. There's two inputs. There's the ciphertext and the secret key. And that's a function, and you can compute it homomorphically. And you'll end up with, well, an encryption of the decrypted ciphertext, which is just another ciphertext that encrypts the same message. And so bootstrapping evaluates this decryption function on an encrypted secret key to get an encrypted result. And if you set up all the parameters correctly and do this properly, the resulting ciphertext has less noise than the one you started with. And so now you're in position to do more and more homomorphic computation on it. And you can repeat this process over and over indefinitely. So it's a great idea, just really, really lovely. And we have done various research on, because bootstrapping is so important, on optimizing the efficiency of bootstrapping in various ways. And so I think it's a wonderful intellectual problem It's clearly very important for practice, for making FHE realistic. So it's a topic I've really been interested in and done a good deal of research on. And some of the insights that we had that I think have continued to be built upon and exploited were to view this decryption function less as a circuit, right? Originally, it was let's view this as a Boolean circuit with AND gates and NOT gates and NORs and things like that. Let's view it more algebraically or more arithmetically, and actually understand what is the decryption function computing, which parts of it can we do very efficiently in a homomorphic way, which parts of it can we really squeeze down to the most the basic algebraic operations. And so with my PhD student, Jacob Alperin-Sheriff, one thing we did in 2014 was to introduce this way of doing bootstrapping with the GSW scheme that treats it very algebraically and not as a circuit at all, but as a special kind of operation on permutation matrices and et cetera, which was a very good fit for the GSW scheme. And so it made it much more efficient. It made the error growth very small. And the basic ideas behind this have been improved and more algebraic structure has been added and so forth. And so now some of the most fast and efficient bootstrapping methods are kind of based on this perspective of this like arithmetic view of how decryption is working.
That's great. And obviously lattice methods are being applied to post-quantum cryptography for key encapsulation. Unfortunately, we can't find the replacement just now for the Diffie-Hellman method.
Mm-hmm.
So it's now key encapsulation and also for digital signatures. So NIST have approved FIPS 203, which is MLKEM, and that's Kyber, and FIPS 204, which is dilithium, that's ML DSA. And they also approved Falcon, which should be coming along quite soon. So when you wrote the paper Lattice Cryptography for the Internet in 2014, did you really think that lattice methods would end up eventually replacing RSA and elliptic curve?
So it may seem overconfident, but yes, I did actually. I thought
You should
this
have put a
stuff
bet
is.
on it.
I guess so. I mean, I probably wouldn't have written these papers if I didn't believe that this stuff could really be real and sooner rather than later. Even going back to the 2006 paper, I thought this is okay, it's a hash function. It's a very basic thing, and people don't usually use algebraic hash functions. We have Ketchak, and we have SHA-3 and SHA-2 and things like that. But the thing that I thought was so interesting about this was that we could have really, algebraically defined objects that were fast. They were just fast, and they were practically fast. The algorithms were very kind of bread and butter Fourier transform type things that run really well in parallel. I mean, we have decades and decades of people optimizing Fourier transforms and hardware for them and everything. And it seemed inevitable to me that this stuff would be plenty efficient enough for reality before too long. I don't think I expected that the range of applications or fully homomorphic encryption, right? I didn't see that coming for sure. But I think I can say that I definitely believed this stuff could be real and used in practice. Now, that doesn't mean all the problems are completely solved and it's a complete drop-in replacement or anything like that. But yeah, I definitely believed that these systems could be competitive. And I thought that Ring LWE was a good contender for that because of all this high efficiency that it has.
Yeah. And obviously a key challenge will be to replace all our primitives that we have just now, the Shamir shares. I know that Chebyshev functions can be used to mimic mathematical functions. So we can write programs that would allow us to use our standard maths. But there are some primitives. I think pairing-based cryptography is having problems. But you did say ABE was possible. Which primitives do you think are important at the current time for us to be able to scale our existing public key encryption methods, and which ones do you think are still missing that need to be worked on?
Yeah, there's a lot that's been accomplished, but definitely a lot of areas are still quite extant or early on in terms of post-quantum alternatives. We have the basic things like public key encryption and signatures. These are okay. They're now mature enough to be national NIST standards. So that's great. But I think a lot of the work that's been happening on more advanced cryptography, like SNARKs is a big one, right? There's so much work on optimizing these succinct, non-interactive zero knowledge proofs, and we're really at a fairly early to medium stage in terms of post-quantum versions of SNARKs. There's been a lot of great work on them, but the level of understanding, the level of efficiency is qualitatively very different from what we have with pairing-based cryptography. So that is and will remain a big research area for quite a while, I think. And there are a lot of other privacy preserving cryptographic primitives of all kinds, oblivious pseudorandom functions and blind signatures and group signatures, and it just you name it, right? There's a wealth of these concepts that have been developed since the 80s using our more kind of legacy standard mathematics, and lattices work so differently that it's a big challenge to kind of construct similar types of objects with comparable efficiency from them.
Yeah. And obviously one of the best primitives is our non-interactive zero knowledge proof. So we're taking Schnorr's challenge method and then Shamir's genius of making this non-interactive. So how does a non-interactive zero knowledge proof work with lattice methods?
Yeah, well, in some sense, not all that differently if you are willing to accept random oracles or other heuristics of this nature. And so there are many challenge response type zero knowledge proofs that are interactive, and you make them non-interactive just with this magic random oracle. But if you are seeking a more like theoretically sound, true, no magic, no magic in your proof, then it's quite a bit more difficult. This was a problem I think I started thinking about around 2008 with the Trapdoors paper, and for the longest time, just nobody could get anything on it. So it remained this very sticky problem, right? I mean, we have non-interactive zero knowledge proofs since the 80s using factoring and other things. And we can do all these things with lattices, but we can't do NIZKs. Like this is just not right. But it took more than a decade for that finally to be cracked and solved. And the way that it was resolved was not by any way I don't think anyone would have expected. It turns out that this idea of taking a challenge response protocol and making it non-interactive with a random oracle can be implemented in a way that doesn't require random oracles. So using what's called a correlation intractable hash family or hash function, you can kind of use that instead of the random oracle. And if you do things just right, you can get a provable non-interactive zero knowledge proof without any magic and or magic random oracles. The construction of that is really quite intricate, and it involves fully homomorphic encryption. maybe not surprisingly, or maybe surprisingly. So all these things come together in a way to allow you to finally solve this big open problem. So that was in 2019. There was work by Canetti and many others that first showed how to kind of do this using certain kinds of FHE, and then we kind of added the cherry on top with my PhD student Sina to show how to do it just based on the plain learning with errors problem.
Yeah, that's good. And you obviously work very well and with other researchers from other universities. I know that you work with IBM Zurich and with other research teams. What was the dynamic that you had with Craig that made that team work? Sometimes you need different types of people, like the RSA team were very much, they had different types of skills. Ron Rivest was very much a thinker. Shamir was a cracker, and Len was the formal methods person. You needed the three things to come together. So with you and Craig, what was the magic that made things happen?
We've had a couple papers together, right? We had the Trapdoors paper in 2008, and actually, it turned out that we were kind of working separately on these questions. So we came about at sort of the same time, thinking about similar approaches, but with pretty different applications in mind at the time. And so I think we just kind of found out through word of mouth that we were both had like some pretty similar ideas on things, and ended up kind of comparing notes and realizing, oh yeah, there's a lot of similarities here, so we're going to join forces. And you know, I was very interested in using kind of very standard assumptions, SIS, and worst case hardness proofs behind them. And we had this kind of idea for the trapdoor sampler and so forth. And he had ideas about I think different ways of doing the proofs that were tighter, and I added some for the identity-based encryption. And so it was a very kind of coming from different sides, but we sort of had the same tool, I think, in mind, and we're finding had different applications of the tool in mind, and so it all kind of comes together in that way. So that was kind of an interesting experience.
That's great, yeah. And I think sometimes researchers too often work in the same university or in their own little team, and I think it's really healthy to work across boundaries. So when it comes to post-quantum cryptography, obviously we're moving towards key encapsulation or public key encryption. So it's that they're doing the same things now. Could you just explain how lattices work for key encapsulation and public key encryption?
Sure. Yeah. So like we were talking about before, the sort of basic public-private key asymmetry is the public key is basically a lattice, some description of the lattice. The matrix A is something that defines a lattice. And the secret key is, have some short vectors in this lattice. And then to do some encryption, what the encryptor will typically do is sort of take a random point in the lattice. It knows the public lattice and can choose a random point in the lattice and add some noise to it. That's the AS plus E part. So the S, A times S is a lattice point, add the error E, and now you have a point that's kind of close to, but not in the lattice. And you can kind of also fold the message into that AS plus E in a kind of simple way. And that's the ciphertext. So it's a point that's kind of close to the lattice, but not in the lattice. And because learning with errors appears to be hard, it's difficult for an attacker to invert this. It's difficult for an attacker to know what S and E are and what the message would be. But for the one who knows the short vector in the lattice, they can sort of detect this trapdoor allows you to either recover S and E entirely or just determine, is it close to this kind of point or is it close to this kind of point, and distinguish, okay, a 0 was encrypted or a 1 was encrypted. So having this short vector kind of gives you just the right angle to look at the ciphertext and all of a sudden message pops out, and that's how you decrypt.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when it comes to digital signatures, what's the underlying method that's used for those?
Right. Yeah. Digital signatures are substantially trickier to get right. Um, in the early days of lattice cryptography, there were back in the late 90s and early 2000s, there were attempts to build them and various attacks because they didn't come with any kind of security reduction. And so a lot of them were broken. And then in 2006, there was a paper that kind of completely broke all the methods of attempted to building signatures. So they're a lot trickier to build in a way that's anything close to efficient. So the basic idea that we had in the Trapdoors paper in 2008 was to say we're going to use a trapdoor for our lattice. So again, a lattice is a public key, and the trapdoor is a bunch of relatively short vectors in the lattice. In fact, it's an entire basis. So it's a set of vectors that generates the entire lattice. And the idea is that to sign a message, the message kind of defines a random shift of the lattice, or you can think of it as a random point in space that's kind of dictates how much you shift the lattice. And you use the short vectors or the short basis to randomly sample a short vector in this shifted lattice. Or you could also think of it as sample a lattice vector that's relatively close to this random hash point that your message is corresponding to. And the idea of producing a short lattice vector or a short vector from a shifted lattice goes back to the original attempts. But the new ingredient was to do so in a way that doesn't leak any information about the short basis that you use to produce this signature. That's what the early attempts didn't do. They were just sort of deterministic. And it turned out that deterministic approach was what caused it to be broken. It was possible to look at a bunch of signatures and determine, basically reconstruct the short basis that was used to produce them. And once you have that, you have the person's secret key. You can forge any message you like. And so the key insight here was to use random sampling from a distribution that doesn't leak any information about the short basis that you're using to produce it. And so that's as I promised, quite a bit more technical than the picture for public key encryption. But it also gives us all these other great applications like identity-based and attribute-based encryption and a lot more things.
Yeah, but it won, and it won in both categories with NIST. So for both encryption and encapsulation and with signatures, it was lattice methods that generally had the best compromise for performance and key sizes as compared to the other ones. So when it comes to performance, obviously we're over the line with NIST on the post-quantum cryptography. So I think it's well proven that even on an IoT device, lattice will work quite well. But obviously with the homomorphic encryption, that's in a different field and a different size of a problem. Do you think we need different types of hardware? Just like in machine learning, CPUs don't really work anymore. We need to move to GPUs and ASICs. What type of hardware do you think we really need? Or can we do this on our existing CPU type models?
Yeah, I think it's a very natural application for either completely custom hardware or at least somewhat specialized for purpose, right? And the great thing about GPUs is, they're matrix multiplication machines, right? That's what they're for. That's their whole purpose in life. And most, if not all, of the operations in lattice cryptography are are matrix multiplies of some kind or another, or Fourier transforms. These sort of very bread and butter basic types of things that we have a lot of experience optimizing. It's not completely trivial because the domain of the data is somewhat different, right? It's still modular arithmetic rather than floating point necessarily. So there's not a complete perfect match there, but I think there should be plenty of opportunities for good engineering to either overcome that mismatch of types a little bit, or to design very specific hardware for it. One of the things I was part of a project that was focused on exactly this question of custom hardware for FHE, and one of the technical challenges was not so much the speed of the operations, but the memory. So FPGAs, they have a good, healthy amount of memory on them, but not nearly as much as we would have liked. And in FHE, the keys are very big. The key switching keys, the ciphertext, everything's quite big. And so fitting that in memory that's very close to the processing turned out to be one of the main challenges, and moving the data around and so forth. So yeah, we don't have to. It's not just thinking about the computation, but also the memory usage and movement turn out to be more of the bottlenecks.
Yeah. And obviously, maybe one of your nightmares is to wake up one day and find that learning with errors had been cracked in some way. And obviously, that would have so many risks for the internet. I know that there are still some questions around learning with errors, but do you think there are still security issues underneath using these methods?
Yeah, I mean, like Silvio, my PhD advisor, says, cryptographers seldom sleep well at night, right? It's just like you said, you can wake up one morning and someone has a brilliant algorithmic idea, and they break the assumption that so much of your cryptography is built on. And this is the risk we take in the field, right? We can't even prove that P is not equal to NP. So it could be that somebody solves that and kills all cryptography, not just my favorite assumption, but all of cryptography. So, we're sort of having to kind of go out to the edge inherently in this business. So, what can we do? We can say we need and want people to work on trying to crack these problems, right? And come up with whatever algorithmic ideas they can. And now, the hope for belief is that they're even quantum secure. So we also want people to work on quantum algorithms, right? And to think about them. I think that it seems to me that of the options that we have identified, lattices are among the strongest that we have out there. And you have to make sure the parameters are right and so forth. But at a really foundational level of how much scrutiny they've received by experts and so forth, I think they stack up as well as anything we can give out there, maybe apart from hash functions, but those have very limited application uses. So, but one always has to keep attacking, right? I mean, we're one idea away from a complete change in what we think and what we believe about these problems. We can say there have been many serious attempts and efforts over the past 20 or so years, or maybe longer, by real experts to come up with new approaches to try to break these things, either quantumly or classically. And there've been many worthy attempts that ended up not changing the status quo. And so I think that is reason for some increment in confidence. If nobody's trying, then you shouldn't have confidence. And so you'd have to have people trying. And, there are attempts that, became public, or people reported on, here's what I tried and it did or didn't work. and there are attempts that didn't become public, but that kind of people just talk about internally. And it's a little bit unfortunate the publication incentives don't really point toward reporting on failed attempts, right? Like, here's an idea I tried, it was somehow qualitatively different. It didn't work because X or Y, or I couldn't get it to work, right? So they sort of die on the vine in that way, and only only the rumor mill knows about them, right? But they don't get part of the scientific literature. So that's a little bit unfortunate because it would help, but incentives aren't such that there's a strong enough reason to make that happen. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the topic, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you could have made a lot of money on your lattice methods if you had have patented some of your leading papers. It could have ended up like the RSA method. Now, lattice is going to be used in post-quantum cryptography and homomorphic encryption. Think of every single method that was actually applied there. And obviously, in some cases, such as RSA and the SNOR signature, the industry's been held back by patents, but you've generally not moved towards that. So what's your feelings on patents in academic research?
Yeah, I don't have any patents. I've never applied for one. As far as I know, there aren't any in my name out there. But certainly on the things we're talking about, there aren't. I suppose mainly due to laziness, I suppose in some sense. I mean, I just feel like maybe there are better things to do than write up patents. But I generally do come down more on the side of that they probably put unnecessary friction and burden on the community. And so that's part of the reason it wasn't purely laziness, but I think also it's not clear that many of the things we've seen would have happened if certain inventions had been patented. I mean, maybe they would have. It's not my area of expertise. But as an academic and as a scientist, I think I would much rather see my work be out in the world and having a positive impact, rather than necessarily getting ridiculously rich over thing. I'm doing fine, and the money's good, so there's not really a reason to be too greedy about it. And the scientific reward is a good one. So that's sort of how I think about it.
Yeah,
I think that in
excellent.
certain cases, patents can make sense for maybe more very specific application areas or something of that nature. But for sort of the more fundamental advances, I would rather see these not be patented.
Yeah, I think for startup companies and university spin-outs, they're probably quite important to get investors interested because at least they articulate the
That's what I
intellectual
understand.
property that can be protected. But obviously, they can be difficult when large corporations have them. So, what does the next decade look like in cryptography? What do you think are the main problems that need to be solved?
Wow. In cryptography as a whole, or in my
Well,
area?
in your area, you know that well, but obviously anything related to cryptography, really.
Yeah, I suppose I can comment maybe more intelligently or make better guesses about my area. I mean, some things we mentioned before, snarks and other privacy preserving primitives being made both efficient enough and understandable enough and applicable enough, I think is a really great topic. I think there's a good deal of momentum behind it now, but we still need some real breakthroughs. I think both in terms of the basic concept of how these work, but also just devising the schemes, making them efficient enough. There's so many different dimensions on these these things that need to be improved, both in the non-lattice and lattice world. So I think there should be and will be a lot of activity and improvements in that area. Let's see. I mean, for cryptography as a whole, I go back and forth between extreme excitement and, let's say, pessimism about, we make these amazing intellectual discoveries and constructions and proof techniques, and it's an amazingly vibrant area. And it takes a long time to see it realized in reality and having a meaningful impact on people's lives. So it's a long span. And, when we think about things like multi-party computation, which was devised in the 1980s, and it's still now, okay, it's being used in, certain very limited application ways, but the promise of this thing is so powerful, and yet we don't quite see it happening in ways that really matter for applications or for real life. And it's starting to, right? I mean, it's amazing the progress that has happened in the field toward making MPC real, for example. But we're talking 4 decades now, right? And so it feels like sometimes the theory of cryptography is so far ahead of what is needed on the ground that can sometimes be a bit dispiriting. But I think a big problem is just getting it through that pipeline where it can have a real world impact for some of these brilliant ideas, and finding the right applications and business cases for them and so forth.
Yes.
I mean, one thing that is pretty encouraging, we've saw, I think this summer or this fall, Apple announcing that they're actually using some fully homomorphic encryption and private information retrieval on their side in their ecosystem. And that's pretty exciting because that's a very big company. That's a billions of users, right? And for the services that it's going to be used on, that's quite exciting. And we're talking, 15 years since FHE was first discovered to it now being deployed at this huge scale in a meaningful way.
I completely agree, and we use the Apple use case of their secure cloud and homomorphic encryption as really a vision of the future, the way the data should be handled. So I think that's an excellent use case. So if you had to change one thing about your career, what would it be?
I don't know. I feel like that's like difficult because there are not too many things I can complain about. I feel quite happy about how things have gone. So it's like a genie offering you some wishes or something, or the monkey's paw with unintended consequences. I guess if I were to change something about my career, I might have gone more deeply into FHE earlier. I was working on different things at the time, and I was kind of paying attention to it, but I wasn't going deep into it and trying to see what improvements I could make. And so I felt a little bit behind the curve when these 2nd gen and 3rd gen were coming out, and it was very fast moving. And so there were some things, that I might have felt like, oh, I could have discovered something, sooner or differently at the time. But I can't complain. There are always great discoveries to be made, even if things are moving quickly.
That's great. So my last question. Thanks very much for answering all my questions. I've learned a great deal. Thanks so much. I'm so interested in fully homomorphic encryption and lattices, and such an interesting area, and we see so much potential. So you've obviously worked with some amazing people, but who would be your cryptographic hero or heroes that you really look up to?
Oh, wow. I think the people at MIT, the Ron Rivest, Silvio, Shafi, all very different technical discoveries and scientific discoveries, but all really brilliant in their ways and with different kinds of impacts and intellectual stories and profiles. So definitely the three of them are way up there. Craig Gentry is one of my heroes. I think just the sheer creative force that he has. I mean, there are so many. I feel like naming some diminishes all the others that I could have. Oded Regev and Daniele Machancho wrote the papers that really made it possible for me to understand and get into this area. And so going deeply into their papers, written beautifully, just so clear and elegant. So those are just a few that I can name.
Well, thank you so much. As I said, I've learned a great deal, and all I can say is keep up the amazing work. And what you actually did 10 years ago is now building a new internet, and it'll be a better internet. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was great being with you. I really enjoyed our conversation.